Good afternoon and welcome to our first CARNET Insights. It's with great pleasure that we start this series of monthly events to think about the future of our mobility, the future of our cities, how we will move in the future and what effects this will have. I'm very happy to start with this important topic that personally worked in my life for quite a while, which is demand responsive transit. And I'm also very happy to have with us today Gerard Martret, Sergi Vila, and Miquel Estrada. Thank you for being here. And online we will have Lidia Signor from the UITP, who will present our speakers and will appear in this screen hopefully soon. Thank you again, and we wait for your presence in the next CARNET Insights that we will be celebrating every month here at CASA SEAT to think all together where we go with our mobility. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now you should see me.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hello, you all. I cannot see you, unfortunately, but I know you are many there. Thanks, CARNET, for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here, even if online. I wish I could be there with you all. So, hola, Barcelona. I'm your facilitator tonight. We're going to have a nice talk about transport on demand innovation, or DRT, demand responsive transport, as we more generally call it in the sector. My name is Lidia Signor. I'm the Combined Mobility Manager at UITP. And for you to understand from which point of view I'm talking, UITP, it's a big association of public transport, and it's big in geography, not only because it's present on 5 continents, but also in history, because it dates back to when we had horses on the street. So it's that kind of history that we have, but back to the present, public transport is living an extraordinary time with lots of innovation and changes. And change is also ahead because we need to respond to great challenges like the climate change, the climate crisis, but also a new demand, a demand for livability, for better ways to move around in cities and beyond. So combined mobility is my title, is also what I work on at UITP, and it's basically, if it's not a bus, a tram, or a metro, all the other services being taxi or micromobility or DRT, they are under my radar, basically. And what I look is more into the complementarity, how we can create better mobility with all of this, with this ecosystem. So today it's about DRT, demand responsive transit. And well, okay, it's innovation, but I have to tell you, it's not new, okay? You can, perhaps you know already, you have an image. Usually we visualize it as a minibus or a van that adjusts dynamically its route and schedule to the explicit demand of user. Perhaps we have Uber in mind, but with more people in it, like a van, right? But if today this is possible in real time via an app that's easy to imagine, but also thanks to a powerful algorithm, the concept of DRT is not new. It's been serving millions of trips per year in many cities for decades. Many big services, DRT or paratransit as we call them in this context, are in the US, so in America, where since 1990 there has been a legal obligation to set up these services for people with disabilities. So you see, it's not new, but the concept was limited. And why are we talking about it now? Because, well, there is something new. Technology is in there, but not only, because actually it allows new models, it expands possibilities, basically, to answer to different travel needs. Think about something, transport during the night. Think about achieving, expanding the coverage of public transport beyond the stations, so getting to reach those hubs to connect with public transport. But these are only very few cases. There are many different cases now possible, and this is because DRT is gradually becoming mainstream. If before it was a nice to have, well, now it's a must have. So this is what new, and I'd like to share with you perhaps on a slide, and I know that they're going to put a slide, there we go, so you can see it with me. I'd like to share with you some data on the market. So this is new, there's a new market. You see here also in terms of timing, this is pretty new, like it dates back 5 years more or less, and you can see the growth. So there are nowadays 450 projects more or less around the world. This data is from October 21, so it's not the latest one, but still. And you can see also for the colors, those are different continents of different areas. And you can see that the most projects are in Asia, North America, and Europe. And you can also see that COVID hasn't slowed down much of these services. The expansion, the development has continued. So this is one important point of how DRT has become something important. And in the next slide, please. Yes, there we go. You see it geographically. It's on every continent. Again, this is getting mainstream. And what you can also see here in this map is that perhaps there are, for the colors that you see, there are different companies, different players, and they have perhaps a regional presence, as you can see. That is also interesting to see in the market, how it is evolving. And in the next last slide, please. There we go. So what kind of, well, business model or market segment are they pursuing? Was those players, what are they? Are they delivering this directly to the users, meaning you and me? Or are they doing that for government? And what you can see is that an evolution, and very much from the beginning, there were a bit more towards the end user, as we call it, the people directly. Now, very much the growth of those projects are coming from services to the government. So working with authorities, municipalities, operators. So this is also an important development, but there's a but to this dynamic. As you can see, the B2G, or the service to the government, is dominating, but those are, many of them are pilots. So, and they are pilots, meaning that they last for a specific time, short time, and they have very small fleets. So this picture is dynamic. It is going to evolve again, and we are really looking for ways to make them stable, here to stay. So this is what I wanted to share with you as an introduction to the topic. And now let's go and discuss more with our great guests here. I'm going to introduce one by one, and I'm going to allow you to have first remarks. So let me start with Gerard Martret, is CEO and founder of the mobility platform Shotl. Gerard has been a serial entrepreneur in the field of mobility during the last 20 years. So prior to Shotl, he co-founded and managed mobility startups, Drivania International in 2001, Roadbox Technology in 2006, and Camina Lab in 2014. His fourth and latest venture, Shotl, in 2017, had just been acquired by Middle Eastern mobility unicorn SWVL. Gerard, you're going to tell us all how you pronounce it, please. What is the right way to pronounce it? And for all of you, this company will be NASDAQ listed. Well, actually, I guess it's been already. You tell us. It's been listed in NASDAQ in February 2022. So, Gerard, please introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us what is your role in the DRT ecosystem, and please give our audience an example of what a perfect DRT service is from your point of view.
Good. Well, thanks so much for the presentation, and also thank you for having us here today. Well, as has been said, me and my co-founders have been working in the field of mobility for the last 21 years. We founded a company called Trevania back in 2001, and then a series of spin-offs, and Camina Lab, which is a venture builder that helped us allocate funding to create other projects that could be not related to what we were doing back then, which was international chauffeur service, which also was pretty much disrupted by new technologies around 2009, 2010. That took us to open our first branch in the city of San Francisco. That was something that we always wanted to do. It's like the perfect place for an entrepreneur to be in, and this is something that we wanted to experience. And that took us to realize that there could be a major change a few years from that moment, which would be related to public transportation in this field, or at least we can call it shared mobility services that could be applied to many other environments, not only around the public transport arena in our geographies, but also in developing countries. That could be something that could make a major change, as there's a lot of people that don't have any access to a personal mobility. That was something that we started. I want to mention also that I had the chance to know who Laia Pagès, the person who introduced us today, was. She was back then already, a few years before that, working on modeling on shared mobility services, which was really disruptive to be done at that moment. And it was actually an inspiration for us to start applying the algorithms that eventually became what today is Shotl, something that we could test out in Barcelona back in 2016 in cooperation with UPC and SEAT, and eventually, of course, became a company. And as it's been well mentioned as well, we've been acquired by a major player. It's a unicorn that's based in Dubai. That's going to be listed in NASDAQ in just a few weeks, and that's going to take us to the next level. We are right now and living a moment of growth I've never experienced before. It's hectic and it's very interesting at the same time. We want to grow in Barcelona, and we're growing our team in Barcelona. We're hiring a lot of people, developers mostly, and also people specialized in artificial intelligence, which is something I'll be happy to talk about later if questions and comments come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. Indeed, I cannot see you, but applaudissement. That's great. So thank you very much for that. And let's welcome the second guest, Sergi Vila, Chief Operation Officer at SEA Code. So Sergi is co-founder, and since July 2017 is responsible of operations and finance, responsible to ensure the operation of this center of excellence, as a startup within the SEAT group. As a responsible of finance, is taking care about profitability of the new company and exploring new business lines in mobility services. So since 2019, Sergi is Chief Operations Officer at SEAT Code. So please, the floor is yours, Sergi. Let us know more about you and what perhaps can be a perfect on-demand service from your point of view.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to CARNET to organize this here in CASA SEAT, because I think that is a good place to speak about mobility. And mobility is one thing that in SEAT Code we are passionate about it. And in specific in DRT, because we start, as mentioned, the project of SEAT UPC, we start some years later with our first software related with mobility. It was by bus in SEAT Code. And it was only the beginning of the line that we are following in order to provide mobility services, to provide better mobility for all the citizens in the different aspects. No? We are running a lot the topic of sharing, but the demand responsive transport for us, or shuttle on demand, is something that we want to explore more in deep, because we believe a lot that is the new line that will provide mobility for citizens that don't have possibility to get this mobility, and this is very important for us. You mentioned what is a perfect DRT. For us, a perfect DRT is something that provides this mobility to people that in a normal situation don't have possibilities to have this mobility. This is one part. And the other part probably will be the mix between classical mobility, regular bus lines, trains, owned cars, private mobility, mix this part of demand responsive with the other in order that in every case you can select the better mobility for you. No? This is the thing that we believe that is not future because we are running this, because it's a reality. We have softwares on the market and we are testing. And okay, I'm happy to share with you this knowledge and the questions with the rest of the audience to grow more in this line. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergi. And then the last but not least guest is Miquel Estrada, member of CARNET Academic Committee, professor and head of the EIT initiative at the UPC. Miquel Estrada is Associate Professor of Transportation in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at UPC BarcelonaTech. He is member of the CARNET Academic Board, which is a consortium between UPC BarcelonaTech and Volkswagen Group, is responsible for the EIT Urban Mobility activities at UPC since January 2022. So congratulations, and please, Miquel, let us know more about you, and like with Sergi, what could be an example of perfect DRT service from your point of view. Thanks.
Thank you, Lidia, and thank you, the organizer, for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure. Well, the UPC has been involved in several public transportation projects, innovative projects, in the last 20 years, in collaboration with the main operators in the Catalan and in Spanish context. And in the last 10 years, for instance, we took part in the creation or in the redesign of the Barcelona bus network in Barcelona, led by TMB. There are two representatives of TMB over there. Thank you. So in the last 10 years, we have explored, together with different research groups in lab, BIT, the potentialities of DRT systems, from 2 points of view. First of all, the potential user performance that these systems can provide, and on the other hand, the operating costs that PTOs will incur when deploying this kind of service. And we developed several analytical tools, simulation tools, in order to identify the optimal provision, the optimal balance between user performance and operating costs. And for me, the critical point right now for DRT systems is to identify the proper business models, and the proper contracts and fee structures in order to make these services profitable for PTOs. We know that probably in these services, if are provided on behalf of the governments, will be subsidized, but we need to analyze the proper subsidies to run the service.
And also for Miquel, yes. Very good. Thank you. Thank you to all of our very knowledgeable guests today. I've prepared two main questions for you. And then, of course, we're going also to open the microphone for the people in the room that like to ask questions. So let me start with the first question. There is no doubt that the COVID crisis has had a deep impact on our mobility. And in particular, in many urban areas, the ridership public transport is between 50 and 80% of the pre-COVID level, while traffic levels are almost back to pre-COVID levels. So this taking into account the fact that less people are commuting nowadays because of widespread teleworking practices imposed by government and companies. So if we don't want cities to wake up in a permanent state of gridlock, well, it is crucial that people use more public transport, walk, and cycle more. So we've seen in the slides I was showing at the beginning, nowadays there are many pilots with very small fleets. So we know that DRT services were crucial in many cities to bring essential workers to and from their workplace during the peak of pandemic, that we know. But coming out slowly of this crisis, well, people in city really need those services to scale up, to make a difference. So in your experience and informed opinion as the experts you are, what needs to be done to get out of the pilot phase and to have a widespread availability of DRT services, in your opinion? I was going to start from Gerard and then go to Sergi and finalize with Miquel. So Gerard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, our experiences for the last 5 years have been always around solving the problems in areas with very low density. And it's always where we had a major impact. How do we connect those areas that are not connected to the city? And I'm speaking of outer neighborhoods. I'm talking about the suburbs, business parks, big corporations, connecting plants together, buildings together. And that has had, it was beyond the pilot, has been a service that's been permanently stable until COVID. Some of them has been still active during COVID because the numbers of riders that we've been having have been above the average of riders or the ridership in the general transportation services in large cities. So that gave cities the vision that, well, this is something that can be sustained even in very difficult times, because at the end we are ensuring also occupation on board. We can play with that, the number of seats that can be occupied or not. That's an important detail that proves also that the ridership of demand-responsive lines during COVID have been declining, but at higher levels. At least ridership was slightly higher than the general public transportation service. I'm mentioning lower density areas because actually, if we look at cities like Barcelona is a city where public transportation is extremely efficient. We have a city that's very well organized in many sense, from an economic perspective, social perspective, well connected, super frequent. You have so many options. It is all available, an amazing subway system, and it's well connected with the outskirts. But still, we have a lot of traffic in the cities, and if we identify where this traffic is coming from, it's often coming from the outskirts. People that live in the city don't need to have a car or drive a car unless they need to leave the city. But people that live outside Barcelona, normally they use their own vehicles to move to the city because it's always available, and still it's a very convenient way to get to the city. Now we are looking at those cases, and we are working and making an effort to really communicate that the greater Barcelona, or at least the area that's outside the city of Barcelona, I'm talking about cities like Sant Cugat, where we have three on-demand bus lines, or Sant Just, or Molins de Rei. For those who live here, these are locations that are 20 minutes, 15 minutes away from the city, in some cases well connected with public transportation with more or less frequency, but still people drive from home to the city because at the end they don't have a way to get picked up 5 minutes, 10 minutes from home. Now this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect major transportation hubs like the subway or the train system of Ferrocarrils Catalans, or bus lines, or the tram, for example, with homes, so that people is able at the end to request a ride on a bus, to ensure a seat on real time from home, and be also certain that that vehicle is going to pick that person up in a matter of minutes. So they only have to walk to a bus stop and be picked up on a flexible vehicle. That means that that vehicle is going to move flexibly, is going to pick up people, drop off people, but it's a non-stop loop that's ensuring a much higher ridership. So to summarize, this is an extraordinary solution to prevent people to drive inside the city, but in order for this to be successful, we need to focus on these locations that I have been mentioning.
Okay. I follow.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please, Sergi.
Yeah. No, in order to not to go in deep, because I think it's interesting to speak about the concrete cases, but going to the pilot, in CETCO, we always say the same, that we love pilots. Why we love pilots? Because the only way to test something is running a pilot, and after this you can see if it works or not works. No? The concept of running pilots in these areas outside of the metropolitan area that there are some needs about mobility is the best way in order to see if the people is using the service. And at the end, we believe that with these pilots, you can test the hypothesis of the mobility in these areas. And at the end, if the people is using, the public administration will go to support this because it's a common benefit for us. Is the topic of if it's finance good or not good, the investment, I think that is a secondary step. Now we need to run these pilots in order to test if the people is using. If the people use, at the end will be something that will support this mobility, and obviously DRT is part of the solution of this, no? Because as you have mentioned, the topic of going with external areas, that a lot of times there are people that is living in these areas that they don't have, they are not owners of a car and they don't have train, don't have regular bus. This type of mobility is something that is well appreciated for this type of people, and we believe that this can be the future. More pilots going to production in the future.
Okay, so pilots, people using it, and then the government follow. Let's hear from Miquel what he can tell us from his perspective.
Okay, I guess that the technology is already launched. Okay, so we are able right now, okay, to gather data about the location of potential customers. We have planning tools, okay, in order to draw on, in order to design, okay, the service, given the specifications of the site. But I guess that probably the question is how we are going to introduce the different kinds of flexibility into the design. Okay, there are DRT services, okay, embrace many different, okay, flexible service, okay, so there can be a bus that can skip stops, but this bus follows just a given layout. This bus can have flexibility to make some detours, okay, in order to visit, okay, the location, the potential location of customers. So we need these planning tools in order to deploy tailored designs for the specific site. And again, as Sergi said, the second step is, well, the technology is given, but right now we have to build these regulations. We have to build these optimal fare structures in order to guarantee a minimal social welfare and social return for the society. Because right now there are several DRT services, okay, that are operated similarly or resembling taxi services, but the user pays just, okay, this service as a mass transportation service, okay? So we are providing excellent service, but in a social point of view, okay, at a regular fare or similarly to the mass transportation. So I guess that the new contracts have to be flexible. There are some contracts in which the government pays just for the mileage or the kilometer run. And what happens if the bus needs to wait 30 minutes in order to be coordinated with a rail stop or something like that? So the government has to pay or has to subsidize also for this waiting time spent at these stops. So that the contracts will change and will be flexible in order to reproduce the new scheme, okay, of DRT services, okay, and the new operations.
Very, very interesting. The key question, how we then transform, I can say translate perhaps, the flexibility that technology gives us into the system. And that means dealing with regulation, dealing with contracts, dealing with how we are regulating public transport. So the fare structure, how much we pay, how we pay, and also there is part of the user, as it was mentioned, how we get users on board. So that is also a very interesting point for these new services. So, okay, let me go ahead to the second question then, and then perhaps we can hear more from the public. So, second question for all of you there. I'm gonna talk more about the future, but perhaps it's not that far. Let me tell you. So mass public transport, as we know, is the backbone of mobility in urban and metropolitan areas. So public transport authorities and operators look at DRT services as a way to redefine, complement, make more attractive the overall public transport network. Therefore, they focus on the integration of DRT services, and they look ahead also at the automation of public transport as a game changer for mobility. So the vision of the sector, as expressed by UITP, that did the work on that in 2017, by the way, is that only a scenario where automated services are shared, of course, electric, and fully integrated within public transport networks can maximize the environmental, social, and economic benefits that we're looking for today. So cleaner air, less CO2 emissions because of less overall kilometer traveled in the system, more public space for people, less congestion, less costs for road infrastructure, for example, for communities. So all of this comes with attractive, shared, integrated services that make redundant the private car in urban and metropolitan areas, as it was already pointed out. It's a completely change of paradigm that also resonates with the blue ocean strategy of some companies to create new markets. So how do you see the future of DRT services in this more automated, integrated future? What suggestion would you like to give to authorities on how they should integrate DRT services? We were hearing, Miquel, about infrastructure, for example. So yeah, please share your vision on this automated shared future and the role of DRT in there from your perspective. Gerard, the floor is yours.
Sure. As you mentioned before, our company now has been merged with another company. It's a company that's called Shotl, that's based in Dubai. That's been changing dramatically in a very positive way what mass transport has been in megacities like Cairo, like Nairobi, for example, or Islamabad, and so on and so forth. The impact of digitalizing informal transportation services or shared vans in cities where there's no public transportation or the regulatory framework is so flexible, or at least there's none in some cases, where we as Shotl had the ability to really test out and develop technologies that really are a game changer for people that didn't have any access to transportation. Now those vans actually can pick up people punctually, assuring a seat, also ensuring safety, avoiding harassment on board. There's many dramatic changes that have been applied as a social impact that's been very positive, and that translates also to a major, bigger ridership and more popularity of these services. Now, this is something that's affecting emerging markets. It's easy to test out these type of services because there's no bottlenecks. You don't have to agree with many players, whereas Europe is much more regulated, and the scenario here is very different. Now we, as Shotl was doing the same strategy, but now it's even stronger. We have to commit on empowering existing transportation operators. We also need to empower transportation authorities. We need to empower cities. We have to assume that we as a company are tech developers. We come from that background. And although we love cities and urban planning and mobility and so on, we are not a player that needs to disrupt mobility by all means. We don't have to do that at all. Because at the end, there's a lot of knowledge that we don't have on logistics, on maintenance, operational knowledge that we'll never have. And it is our commitment, and the future that we see above us is that we have to keep empowering all these companies. And I'm talking about bus operators in most cases, transit agencies. These, we believe, will be key players also in the future of mobility whenever it is not only shared and electric, but it's also autonomous. And this future, it's probably closer than what we think. Probably 15 years from now, we'll be seeing that. So again, that is the role that we have to keep playing right now. Europe is very important in this sense, where regulation is very strict, but at the same time, if capable of changing and evolving, needs to be inclusive, not only for tech players, but mostly for all-time players in the field of mobility, of transportation.
Great, thank you, Gerard. So a future where, with different contexts, so where Europe, companies like yours empowering existing PTOs and PTAs, but then a different story in different markets, like developing countries and so on, because indeed mobility is very different on this planet, and we need to take that into account. So, very well, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Sergi now. Okay. So how do you see the future of DRT services in this future that is integrated, autonomous, and so on?
Okay, this is a classical question that we see autonomous, and we are running a lot of devices. My colleagues in Volkswagen Group are developing autonomous car, and this is important. But going more with the mobility algorithms that will run the mobility future, we believe that DRT will be part of this ecosystem, because at the end, it's not only DRT, it's shared mobility is inside of this. The classical transportation is part of this, because it will be necessary to have this. But the most important, that the vision that we have in this new mobility is that all the time the mobility will be on demand of the citizen who wants. At the end, nowadays we have all on demand. We have music on demand, we have Netflix, HBO, and all the media on demand. And mobility, we need that in the near future will be in the same way, that on demand. It means that every day I select the mobility that I want. It means that if today is raining, obviously demand responsive transport that for my movement will be good. But if it's not raining, I can get a SEAT motor sharing and run perfectly because it's a sunny day. During the weekend, if I want, I can go with my family to skiing to the Pyrenees, and I take a Tarraco and I go with this. With these three examples, I show you that the way that we need to manage in the future is put together the capabilities of DRT plus the other capabilities that we have in sharing, trying to create these platforms that provide, at the end, this mobility on demand of the citizen, because this is the key. I don't visualize to force the mobility of the people to put a lot of pressure on legislations, because normally, if something doesn't have sense, the people don't use, and is out of the system. And we need to provide this type of mobility on demand that we adapt in the different cases to run this during the next years, this mobility.
Thank you, Sergi. So you're adding an element of integration with this platform that will provide different services, and indeed DRT is part of, but we need to think about broadly the mobility that people will need for different needs, because people are different, because their travel patterns are different. So that is very much a evolution that we see and we can agree on. Let's hear from the third guest, Miguel. What's your view on DRT services?
I completely agree with Sergi and Gerard. Okay, if we conceive, okay, the whole transportation network and services, I guess that DRT services will play a significant role feeding the system, okay, the mass system, the skeleton of operated by public transportation, by buses, by trains, okay. So in the last mile, okay, these DRT services, okay, can provide an excellent service in order to complete the door-to-door service for these passengers. In addition to that, these services will be powered by batteries, okay? We have to think that, or we have to consider that these vehicles will access vulnerable areas, okay, in which children will play in the middle of the street. So we have to reduce the level of emissions, okay, in these areas. Okay, we cannot conceive, okay, as a major bus corridor in which all vehicles will run along the same infrastructure, okay. So the service will be spread over one region in a dispersed area, so that we have to reduce the emissions. And finally, if I may dream for a while, I can add to the equation the concept of modularity, okay? So imagine that these vehicles will be small, the size will be really small. So these vehicles can access the location of one single passenger and can be provided, the service can be provided by pods or small vehicles, buses. And as these vehicles will access to the major infrastructure, these vehicles can merge together, can couple into platoons, okay, in order to be benefited by priority measures and in order to operate without any stop, okay, providing excellent cruising speeds and indeed providing a competitive service in comparison to passenger cars.
Thank you for making us dream. Thanks. So we see a little bit how we see the evolution on mobility. Is indeed a great time to be alive on Earth, I would say. So let me see the time that we have. I don't see the organizer. I don't know if you think that it's already time to open up the microphone, or perhaps we can have more questions.
Yeah, we can open a Q&A session for a while and then follow with the next topic.
Okay, so the audience, it's your turn. What question would you like to ask to our three guests here?
Hi there. I have two questions for you. First one is for Miquel. So you've talked about layouts regarding the mobility and small deviations from those layouts. And also you have proposed, on the other hand, a paradigm of bus and small shuttles. On the first case, is it the performance limited by the layout and those semi-static bus stops, let's say?
Well, we have analyzed several implementations and the results of several models, and there is a maximal detour length, okay, that can be accepted, okay, depending on the occupancy of the bus, okay. So if the bus is crowded, okay, we cannot go 4 kilometers away just to pick up one passenger. Why? Because the in-vehicle travel time of the passengers inside, okay, will be really penalized, okay. So the service has to be deployed and built taking into consideration these points and these designs.
Thank you. Then my second question is more oriented to Gerard and Sergi. You have mentioned several times during your speeches that you're trying to get the mobility to the people that cannot afford their own vehicles. And I'm shocked because the figures that we have seen at the very beginning show that no pilots are being held on South America, on Africa, on Asia. I guess the reason may be that the fees there are very low, and so the fleets, the initial investments on fleets is hard to handle. Have you thought maybe on the case of a platform such as Giravolta to open it to the private drivers?
Okay. The topic, obviously, the topic going to Europe for us at the end is the marketplace where we can run faster because we have the technology and we are set up here. But the rest of the countries that you mentioned that we don't have, that the level of going to the new mobility is slower. We are now trying in Nairobi. We have one contact with Volkswagen Group to run in one city. The same. With this, I put you over the table that it's possible to run this in different locations. And obviously, Gerard, with the company, is running with worldwide. The topic of mixing the man-responsive transport with this part of legislation, if it's a driver or not driver, is something that, for example, now in one pilot that we are running in Astipalaia, one Greek island, with authorities, is B2A or B2G, is from the government. The cars will be available for during some hours as a shuttle on demand, and another hours will be available as a car sharing, because with this you optimize a lot the cost of the assets. No? And obviously when the car is available as a shuttle on demand, now is an official driver with all the license and all the setup. No? The idea is try to maximize the uses of the assets inside the platform to provide mobility will be at the end the way that we are running. No?
Well, in the case of informal transport systems or transportation operated by individuals or independent operators, definitely something that cannot be done in regulated markets. It's not possible, but the impact that we as part of Swivel are doing right now affects hundreds of thousands of people in this geography. So developing countries right now are benefiting from this new platform economy that's providing also a way to sustain a business, a personal business for drivers. We call them captains. And also, of course, affecting the lives of people. We just announced the acquisition of another company that's called Via Pool. That's based in Argentina and also doing operations in Chile, Peru. This growth will keep going. We are looking at other strategic alliances in other geographies, but they're mostly having these commonalities. You find exactly the same type of services in other countries, many countries, not only as mentioned like Kenya, but all Africa, most of Africa, different names are applied to this type of transport systems. And digitalizing them is actually a great way also to regulate them, because in a way some of the systems were kind of not regulated and safe, and it's also a way to do that. So it's a good point, and definitely is where we are experiencing our fastest growth.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very interesting. I think it replies, and just to point out that it's not that there are no pilots in Latin America or Africa. There are, and there are other services, perhaps not pilots, but fully running, as Gerard was pointing out with examples. So there is definitely a case, but it's different because the context is very much different, as Gerard was saying.
Hello. So I have a question. So as you were talking about the demand responsive, these transportation in developing countries. So I have so for example, I used to live in India, and we have this sort of like share rickshaw, like share tuk-tuk. So, so the thing is, like, there is a street, like it's near my aunt's place, and where, like, there are so many people using tuk-tuks, and after a while, like, it's very convenient for people, and it's all privatized, handled by like a same fleet owner. And after a while, government thought, okay, why the fuck should we? Sorry. After a while, the government thought, why should we run buses here? Like, I mean, the frequency of the buses reduced, and then after a while, the route was closed because there was not enough people getting onto the bus because everybody's taking the like private shared tuk-tuk, and it's also convenient for them, obviously, and also more accessible. But do you think like privatizing it is going to take the power away from the or maybe responsibility away from the government, and then putting it to the private hands who handles the fleet? Thank you.
Yeah, I would mention like we have experience, for example, in some locations where there's been a public intervention on creating like bus rapid transit, for example, and that has been to solve the particularities of a very disorganized transportation. That happens in cities. We can see that in Colombia, in Brazil. Not having an inclusive perspective where we can also take into account that there's flexible transport systems that have been in place for years. Within the new framework, the new operational framework that's organized from a public perspective, sometimes that's kind of creating a huge gap, and it's kind of a much more complicated way to manage. I mean, it is important to see these systems as systems that people want and that solve a problem and that are able to reach anywhere. Sometimes even locations that have very complicated orography, so it's not easy to walk in certain neighborhoods. So So that is something that needs to be observed as a positive thing. It's not bad that there's people providing these services in those places, but digitalizing them is helping a lot to build that bridge in between the new infrastructure and the players that have been providing technology so far.
Any other questions? Yes, we have one.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I have one question. You mentioned about automation as a game changer for the RT system. Mainly because one of the biggest cost components, if I'm not wrong, is the driver itself, the labor cost in the RT systems. But it's very complicated, it's very complex to implement fully flexible and automated DRT services in urban areas due to all the complexities we have here. Do you think there's room for a middle stage between what is DRT right now and fully automation? And I'm talking about, for instance, remote operations, that one driver could operate several cars remotely. And are there players working in this field?
Can be at the end the topic that who drive the auto, the bus or the car is and how we legislate this is something that will happen sure, because we are now constructing cars with L4 and we are very near to L5 and in 2 years we'll have on the market cars that are available to run without driver. In 3-4 years we'll have this. The most important is not the topic of getting remote of control of these cars. The most important is that all the software that we are developing nowadays, that we have nowadays on the market, is part of this autonomous vehicle DRT system, because at the end, the algorithm to provide how many people you pick up and you drop off during your road, and all the things that now we are developing will be part of this. The only that we need now is that the hardware will advance in the point that can be completely autonomous driving. No? That this is the phase that we are running. But it's more important this part of all the things that we are developing now that will be implemented in the DRT with autonomous car.
I'd like to mention just something as the human aspect of what we provide. We have learned the importance of the driver as a let's call it social community driver. It's a person that interacts with that specific community, because at the end we're talking about a last mile transport system. The role of the driver goes beyond operating the machine. And I would invite you to visit Torre Baró. Torre Baró is a neighborhood here in Barcelona. It has a TMB, has a service that's called El Meu Bus. And the importance of the driver and the interaction of the driver with the users has really impacted the dynamics of the neighborhood. It goes beyond just mobility or transportation. It also is a person that helps people board, sometimes people that don't have access to technology. He provides the flexibility of derouting, and the system allows that to happen as well. So it's not everything is technology, but that happens. So if we think about a future where everything will be robotized, I think that the role of humans providing a much more that human touch, but that that help and the dynamics of a social environment where people is good, when there's an interaction that's much more closer, that's something I believe will keep happening, because we are experiencing right now already.
If I can
Thank you.
add
Yes.
something. No, and in addition to everything that has been said, liabilities. No, right now, okay, manned vehicles. Okay, in Barcelona, you can only get on a bus. Okay, in a specific bus stop, you cannot get on. Okay, out of this area because the insurance doesn't cover any kind of accident out of this area. So these kind of liability issues have to be overcome. Okay, and addressed in order to finally launch this kind of services as well.
Okay, we have another question.
Hi. I would like to ask you if you have worked on not just moving people, but also moving goods in a demand-responsive way. Because actually the algorithm should be similar, maybe? Thanks.
Good question, because as you mentioned, the last mile delivery is linked with the mobility of people. We are thinking in this line in order to improve in Zero Volta our solution with some use cases, because when you have people that is running, can be car sharing or DRT, at the end is the same, but is running doing some roads. If you add this possibility on top, is something that have sense. No, we know the topics of Globo, that is about the bikes, the riders here in Barcelona, but there are possibilities of this, and we are exploring this. We don't have nothing, but we are on the track to have this last mile delivery as a one point to add in the ecosystem of mobility.
In our case, it happened organically. Every single location where we have a corporate operation, like a major airport or big factory, it happened organically. People were sending each other items, documents, and then we needed to adapt our software. We made a version of it that also includes the ability to send a package, because people use the technology the way they want, and then you have to realize that that modularity is there. And also certain times of the day, the same vehicle can, like at night, we could deliver items, and during the day then provide a flexible routed transportation for people. Sometimes it can even be evolved to a fixed line during peak times. Then off-peak times can be flexible. The modularity that you were mentioning, that's something definitely the technology helps you play with that a lot.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, just a second.
Very interesting questions. More of this.
Hello. I want to know your opinion about what can be in the future. What can we call mobility as a service? What I mean is, like an example, I buy a car, SEAT, of course. I buy a car, but with this car I buy, I get some kind of card where I can use for my mobility when I don't use the car. Maybe I use the car to go to the Pyrenees, an example, but to go to work, I use one bus on demand, then on train, and then again another bus on demand, which are from different companies that they need to talk between each one, because I pay to SEAT the car, they rent to me, they say you pay amount every month, and you get all the transportation you want. But of course the company in the beginning, in the middle, and the end, which are different companies, need to talk to each one to assure that, of course, that money that they need to get from my transportation. So is it possible that in the future we have the mobility as a service, and how would that will impact on software companies, government, buses and trains companies, etc.?
Yeah, will be possible, sure, because we need to work together in order to achieve this. Today, it's not the administration here, but it's near the administration, but at the end, the government is part of this ecosystem. I can explain you that our history in the plan of Martorell, because at the end we are using our small city, Martorell is 14,000 people working in the factory, and all the mobility topics that we develop, we test first with our colleagues that are working in the factory. No? And when we started with DRT, with by bus in the plan, it was by bus plus private cars of the people inside every department. It was with 2 or 3 cars. And it was completely going, the people using DRT a lot. After 1 year, we start with car sharing, corporate mobility. And now we have in the factory DRT, corporate mobility with cars, motos, and bikes. And every time the people are selecting different things, because it depends not only if it's raining or not raining. It depends you have a meeting not in Abrera, you need to go to Barcelona. Obviously, you pick a car. You don't use a moto, no? And if you need to go to a train to get a train, you don't use any vehicle. You go with a DRT because you prefer to go with the operator that operate the service, and you prefer to pick this bus and going. The complexity of this is going with mixed with administration and private companies. That this is a step that we need to grow as a country here in Spain, Catalonia. We need to grow doing joint ventures with private and public administration. It's the only way. I don't visualize nothing in another line, because the line between private and public transportation now, you think train and regular big buses are public and cars are private. But a small bus of 7 places is private or public. This type of the discussion we need to put out and try to see the best solution in every case for the people. Is the way that we need to work together. But will happen with the effort of all together working.
I guess that from the technological point of view, the technology is already there. But I guess that the main problem is the governance of these systems, okay? To provide correct and fair information in order to foster public transportation operators, okay? To gather and share data with private companies, and this information have to be fulfilled in several ways, okay? Some standards, and it has to be fair for all players.
Hello. I'm Miquel Estrada. I work at TMB. I'm also very active at UITP. A big fan. Hello, Lidia. How are you? I would like.
Hola, hola.
Hola, ¿qué tal? I would like not to ask something, but to put some emphasis in a part that we discussed today, and that is related with the social function of DRT that in many examples that we see worldwide is not so clear. In our case, we put a big attention in this area of accessibility. That's why we run in a small bus instead of a van, because of the accessibility. Also very important, not everybody has the possibility or the ability to ask for a service with a smartphone. So that's why we have also a telephone line in our Torre Baró that you mentioned before example, where the person who receives the call, they will put information into the system and give information. So for us, this part is very important. The social accessibility, the social inclusion to the system. In the example of Torre Baró, a lot of our customers, they are elderly people that they don't have another alternative to move. And if we solve the mobility to these people with conventional service, it's very expensive, it's not very efficient, and also the frequency will be so bad that it's also very difficult to move. We think we have a successful study case there, and now we are trying to grow up this system to several places of Barcelona, and hope we will get some success on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Last questions? Okay. Ooh, we have a lot of questions, so the topic is so interesting.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for the presentations. They were very good. I wanted to ask about the fact that DRT, even though it's giving a lot of accessibility, at the same time it could be increasing or enhancing the laziness of us as a society. Maybe in the future, even DRT is attracting a lot of pedestrians and cyclists and mass users instead of private vehicle users. So what do you think about this?
Good question. But this can happen nowadays with kick scooters, electrical kick scooters, or bike, no? Because now it happens the same. I think that I return to the theory that the best is that people can select this, and obviously the governments need to incentivize this, that the people is doing exercise. No? This is something that there are a lot of companies that we are providing mobility that they demand us, not saying, okay, it's good, your car, the Born is the best electrical car on the market for sure. We have motos, we have kick scooters, but we need bikes because we want that our employees are healthy and use the bikes during the day. No? And in our plan in Martorell, as I mentioned, we have bikes, and the people is using bikes because it's a historical thing that the people that work in SEAT use bikes. No? At the end, you need to provide this and be sensible with the communication of the society that they use in the best way, and avoid that the people is completely lazy and only is waiting for autonomous car that pick them. You know?
Hi, thank you for your insights so far. I have a question regarding data. As you're coming mostly from private sector, how do you see the collaboration with municipalities regarding data? Like, are you willing to share, and do you see any possible ways that you can create something based on data with the municipalities? Because that's what can create another services for citizens. Thank you.
Well, that's a very sensitive matter. I mean, of course, what do you share and how much can be shared? I mean, we always treat data in an anonymized way. I mean, there's no way to share personal details of any user. All the data that we're able to share with customers and partners is always data that has a lot to do with the patterns, OD matrices, and how people is moving, and we need to learn from that, because we need to have more predictive systems. And the goal of data for us is to create more of a system that's able to predict demand, to place vehicles whenever they're going to be needed, wherever they're going to be needed as well, and make the system much more efficient than what it is. And it needs to be also applied to any other transport system. If we imagine a world that's multimodal, that has many options available, those options have to be always close to the people to incentivize, as mentioned before, active mobility, and to incentivize ways to move that are much more efficient and that much more sustainable. So that needs to be orchestrated, and it depends on every city. Data is there for cities to think what's the model of city they want to live in. And it's a decision that every city needs to take. So we cannot, as a company, and that's something that we take very seriously, use data for our own benefit, because we would be standardizing mobility in a way that every place would look exactly the same. And the same way we don't want to live in a city full of kick scooters in the middle of everywhere that's in a way not letting us move freely, for example, and that's something that Barcelona has done pretty well. We want to live in cities where we all have something to say. And at the end, that's something that comes out of knowledge, and that knowledge needs to be provided by tech companies, and that data needs to be available for the public servants, public authorities, to make the decisions that cities need to make.
Thank you, Gerard. Any other questions? I don't see. So, Lidia, from Belgium, now we back to you for closure words.
Well, what to say? I thank each one of you, the guests, of course, Gerard Martret from Shotl. And I didn't pick up, wasn't the right pronunciation of the new company, though. Is it? How do you pronounce it?
It's called Swivel.
Swivel.
Swivel, yes.
Swivel, okay.
Yeah.
For all of us, Swivel is the unicorn, right? Sergi, the next unicorn, perhaps, from SEAT Code. And then Miquel Estrada from UPC, EIT Urban Mobility. Thank you, the guests. Thank you, the audience, for all these interesting questions. Many knowledgeable people also there. The questions were very technical somehow, so I wish I could be there to exchange more, but it's been a pleasure to be with you tonight. So thank you very much, and I hope we can continue to discuss more with CARNET and further. So stay safe and enjoy the rest of the night.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.